All right, I'm going to call this meeting to order. It is 4 p.m. Before I start the meeting, I'm going to read out a statement. The City of London is committed to making every effort to provide alternate formats and communication supports for council, standing, or advisory committee meetings and information upon request. To make a request for any city service, please contact accessibility@london.ca or call 519-661-2489, extension 2425. With that being said, I've called the meeting to order and look for any disclosures of pecuniary interest. I see none. I understand that Councillor Usher is prepared to move the consent items and seconded by Councillor Squire. We'll get that up on screen for a vote. That's items 2.1 to 2.6 are being moved all together. Please go ahead, Councillor Usher.
We have an added communication also on 2.3.
That's correct. If you look at the added agenda on 2.3, there's a revised staff report. There is a minor mathematical change, and that did make it into the added. So make sure that people have reviewed that and are comfortable with passing that. The motion should be up on screen.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Okay, item 3.1 is delegation D. Foster for the 7th report of TAC. Okay, we have a mover and a seconder. Are you guys moving the reports? I'm not sure if the delegate is here for that. Would you like to move receipt of the report? And that's the 7th and 8th report of TAC. Moved by Deputy Mayor Hubert, seconded by Councillor Usher.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Okay, 4.1 is a request for delegation. I will go to Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Once again, I've read the delegation. Ms. Miller and Mr. Gupta are very familiar to those of us who have been around the Horseshoe for some time. I understand Dr. Mackey was not able to attend. So, Madam Chair, I'm going to move a motion that this request for delegation be referred to the new Civic Works of the new council, and that they can do with it as they wish at that time.
Okay, I have a mover and a seconder on that, and the seconder is Councillor Usher. I look for any other comments. Councillor Usher.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I fully concur with Councillor Hubert. I think this is late in the game to bring this for this committee, and I think that it wouldn't be fair to us to listen to this for both sides. So I think it's only right that we refer this to the new council and the new committee.
Thank you, Councillor. It is our practice at this committee to hear from the public and anyone who puts forward a request for delegation status. It is typically done at a future meeting so that we can have all of the accompanying information and the opportunity for other delegates as well. So I will support the recommendation to refer this to a future meeting of the Civic Works Committee, probably January or February of 2019.
Closing the vote, motion carried 4-0.
Thank you, and I know some members are here, so that has been referred to a future meeting. You'll get notice from the clerk's office. As to the date of that meeting, you'll be invited back for your delegation at that time, and you will have up to 5 minutes to speak to the item. If you have a longer presentation, then I do recommend that you let the clerk know ahead of time so that the committee can approve that. Thank you. We're going to go to item 4.2. And I'm going to look to staff first, perhaps for a quick synopsis of where we're at. I know I'm very familiar with this file. Perhaps you could bring the committee up to speed.
Through the chair, I just wanted to point people's attention that there is a letter that's my response to the letter from the folks at Pine Valley. It's in the added agenda. And we've been working very closely with the residents. They've had historical flooding on the site, both the surface flooding and basement flooding. And we've been doing our best to try to come up with a plan that's going to reduce the risk of flooding in the future. In the letter, I go through what we've told them we were going to do as of February 2017, and then what we've done since that time. And we're on track, and we've really been making this a priority to try to mitigate and try to reduce the risk for their property. One of the things that they have asked, and I do highlight this in the letter, and I think I should probably also just provide a little bit more context, is that they've requested that the city retake ownership of a sewer that's through their property. And we provided our thoughts, and it's really just what we would provide with respect to any type of private development and the servicing within that development, is that the suggestion was for us to assume that infrastructure, and that's not our standard for any development that is private in nature. We wouldn't be taking on that as a city asset. However, there is a long history for this site, and it's a more complex legal issues related to that as well. So if that is for committee to consider whether they'd like to have a more detailed legal opinion of the ownership of that sewer and looking at that history, then that would be appropriate.
Thank you. Councillor Usher, and I am going to give notice. I'm going to ask one of you to take the chair so I can make some remarks. But I'll go to Councillor Usher first, and then I'll cede the chair to whoever volunteers.
Well, Madam Chair, there are two big requests here, and one of them is to take back ownership, and I would really like to hear a legal opinion on that. And the other one is to reimburse or to compensate the condominium corporation for the cost incurred related to flooding in the past. And I believe it's something like $113,000. I'd like to hear a legal opinion on that also before I make a decision.
Thank you, Councillor Usher. And I think if you flip to the added, you might see some of that there, starting on page 96 of the added, where staff have prepared a response and a course of action that they're recommending. And I know that for many members of the committee, they're just getting the added now. So staff do have some recommendations, and it would be that the condo corporation work through the risk management approach and file a claim that way. And then the city can assess which costs could be covered via our policies. So I'll let you take a look at that, and I'll look to see if there are other speakers. And if not, I will ask Councillor Squire, do you mind sharing? I would like to speak. Thank you. And so I wanted to cede the chair because this is a file that I've worked with intimately and probably put in well over 100 hours at people's dining room tables, out in the pouring rain, standing on top of gutters, and in the engineering boardroom. So here I think is a very unique situation where ownership of that sewer has bounced back and forth between the city and the condo corporation. I think that there's some more work that needs to be done there. This is one place when we had the significant flooding that I know Councillor Usher, your ward and my ward were both very impacted by in 2014 and 15. I stood in people's basements and I could still smell the fresh paint from the repair job from 2014, and we were standing in a foot of sewage. So there was a very significant and long history, and we had a lot of impact with this. And so through the work that I've done with staff, I do believe that the correct course of action is to look for ways that the city can compensate some of the costs through risk management as they recommend. But I also think that the ownership of the sewer is unique. As our staff have outlined, the fact that it's gone back and forth between ownership, we don't have a precedent for the situation that we're looking at here. And so I think that looking at the sewer specifically via our legal department is what makes sense. I don't want to start a precedent which will negatively impact the city moving forward, but I do think that this is a unique situation where there have been unique damages to the people in the units here that we should be looking at and taking some responsibility for. So I've put a motion to Ms. Shack that I worked with staff on, and it's just that the city solicitor be requested to provide the Civic Works Committee with an opinion regarding the ownership of this sewer. So we'll put that up on screen so you guys can see it. I think otherwise it would be to receive both the letter and the added letter from Mr. Mathers that he sent to the Condo Corp for information.
Just a clarification on the vote. We're not looking for the city solicitor to do that this evening.
Thank you. No, we would be looking for a report back. I think this is going to take some studying, looking at some history. There's decades worth of history back and forth that I think needs to be looked at so we can see if this is truly a one-off or if it's a precedent center, and I think there are different implications to both of those.
Good to hear that. The concept of the ask causes me a certain amount of consternation in terms of the precedents that it might set. So.
Thank you, Mr. Presiding Officer. You're supposed to smile when I say that. Just when I look at this motion, there are two requests in this letter. This responds to one of them. And I heard you saying, through you, Mr. Presiding Officer, that Councillor Ridley made a statement to receive these. But how does that respond to the request to reimburse? I'll use the word reimburse. The request to compensate Pine Valley. Are you saying that by accepting this report, we're agreeing to that? I just want to be sure that I understand.
From my point of view, that's in the letter, that these costs will be submitted to risk management and considered in that appropriate manner. I don't know if you have anything to add to that, but I think that's what the letter says, that they will be considered, but in a fashion as to whether the city has responsibility for them.
And I respect that, Mr. Presiding Officer. What I'm trying to get at then is, what's the motion that we're going to pass in addition to this request from the city solicitor?
So my understanding, and maybe we need to clarify the language, is that we're receiving the correspondence. We're taking no action on the requests until such time as there are a legal opinion. And the legal opinion pertains to both the ownership and the request for compensation. Yes or no? Only on the ownership?
Through me?
Well, yeah, through you. Well, then I'm not comfortable with that. Through you, I think to the mover of the motion, I think if you compensate, you're now into the weeds of it, and I think you need to get a legal opinion on the whole of it, not a part of it.
Thank you. It is my understanding that if the desire was there for our committee, we would not actually have the ability to provide compensation on this matter. based on the lame duck status of council. Regardless of that, even if we were able to, as much as I would personally desire to, as the person who's worked on this file, I do recognize that the corporation has a process via risk management. And so the only piece that I'm sending or requesting that we send to legal is the piece about the sewer ownership, because I believe that is completely separate from anything that can be dealt with via risk management. We already have the processes in place. That's a process that's outside of council. All of these factors would be considered, and that's the route that I would advise the condo corp to go for the remaining matters. The piece that we have no direction on is this ownership of the sewer, and that's where I think that a future committee needs to get that legal opinion. And so I hope with that understanding, Deputy Mayor may consider seconding this motion.
So to clarify, and just through you, presiding officer, to staff, we're okay with this going through the normal processes of risk management in terms of dealing with the adverse effects and injurious effects and all of those sorts of things.
Chair?
Mr. Chair, yes, that was the intent, that would be referred to the regular process for compensation. And because we had recommended against assuming or reassuming the sewer, there would be a need for direction from a committee to look at that again.
I'm fine with that, as long as we're following our normal process, as long as we're not doing anything outside a process that then therefore creates precedences.
So I appreciate that part of the discussion. When I look at the letter update, says, sorry, the motion, the second portion of it, Mr. Presiding Officer, it says the communication and the response from us be received. But I don't quite understand where that leaves us with the second request. Did I hear from Mrs. Sher that they will take care of this through normal process?
Just if I could help with that, I think the indication is the letter from staff has already indicated that those costs will be considered through the normal process of risk management. I think that's been confirmed. So it doesn't require a decision of this committee. It's going to go through the normal course of risk management, where they'll assess it, I suppose, and determine if there's liability. That's my understanding.
And I just want to make sure that that will happen, because I don't see anything up there that says so. And when we receive it, through you, Mr. Presiding Officer, does that mean that staff will take up this process automatically via risk management and everybody else? I'd really like to hear about that.
We hear that through staff, that's exactly what will happen or not happen, that those claims will be forwarded to risk management and they will assess them.
Mr. Chair, that is correct. The letter from Mr. Mathers from October 29th indicates that we need some more information from them that would be submitted to our regular review process through risk management, and that would be the intent. If it's a desire to include that both of those processes be directed to staff now, that's fine. We don't need direction, though, to submit to risk management.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
And I'll turn back to Chair.
Thank you, and I will follow up with Mr. McLaughlin and Mr. Goss later on by email in case they have any questions that require clarification as well. So we're moving on to item 5.1. We have completed the entire agenda up to 5.1, so I did see a couple of people arrive a little bit later. And I'm not sure if you're just here to observe the meeting or if you're here for a specific item. If you're here for an item, I'm going to let staff consult with you while we continue on through the different matters list. So item 5.1, I did review this with staff at the pre-meeting, and I asked for an updated copy. There are a number of items which were completed and a couple of items which required some date changes. So I do want people to take a look at the added agenda and make sure that they're comfortable with it. I think most everything is up to date. We have really completed a lot of this work. So I will need a mover for the different matters list, moved by Squire, seconded by Hubert. Any other discussion? We'll put that up for a vote.
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.
Okay, and with that, I'm gonna need a motion to go in camera. There are 3 items as outlined on the public agenda. These aren't they're not added items, so these have been on the public agenda for some time. I don't see the need to read them out. And I do wanna make people aware that we will likely adjourn from the committee room. So if I can get a motion to go in camera, moved by Usher, seconded by Hubert, and we'll get that up on screen for voting.
Harold?
Can you vote?
Harold?
Hello?
Oh, sorry.
Hello?
Closing the vote, motion passed 4-0.